Okay, folks, since somebody asked me very nicely, I will do a HeartThrone video. So this is unwrapping the HeartThrone. So of course, first thing you do when you start a new project, File, Set Project, and I will put it to the HeartThrone and hit Set, and then File, Open, and I have a new file that I've created that's a little bit more simple. I created this in class the other day. Took me like 5 seconds. So anyways, this is basically the most simple possible HeartThrone you could make. And we will unwrap this. And it shouldn't take very long, but of course I'll have to go slowly and explain it step by step. So it'll take a little longer than usual. Of course, you're going to want the UV editor open, which is Windows UV editor. That's the key aspect or key element to unwrapping stuff, of course. And I think what I'll do, I will just squeeze my Maya window down a bit so you can see both at the same time without overlapping anything. That's what I'll do, and try to just fill that space. Many people like to use the dual panel thing. I like to have floating windows because I like to arrange my windows exactly how I want them. So doing it this way, Windows UV Editor opens a floating window that you can put wherever you want. I usually put it on my extra monitor, but of course I can't do that because I'm trying to record stuff for you guys. Anyways, but yeah, so this would be one way to do it. Panel layout, you load up a dual pane panel layout, and then you switch the one panel to the UV editor. But some people like that. I don't like to be locked into any particular formation like that, viewport wise. I like mine floating. Anyways, but let's get to it. How do we bust this out? Well, here we go. Again, if I select everything, if you see an upside down T, first of all, let's turn on the texture borders. Oh, and I need a little bit more room here because I need to be able to at least get to this button right there. Okay. So anyways, if you see an upside down T, that means you haven't done shit. So that's bad. Don't do that. That's an automatic fail. That's like more than an automatic fail. It's an automatic 0 because it means you didn't even try. If you try and you screw it up, I'd be a lot more forgiving than if you don't even try at all. So upside down T is probably the worst possible thing you could hand in. If you hand in UVs that are completely screwed up, I can work with that because that means you just tried and failed. Tried and failed, at least you're trying. So, all right, anyways. But let's get this sorted out. So first thing, we're going to start with the large heart shape, very similar to when we actually made this thing. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to, actually one thing that's really useful, new hotkey, brand new hotkey, Maya 2016, Control 1, isolate selected. It's actually, see now I need this to be bigger. Hold on. Let me shrink this again now. Okay, there we go. So it's this button right here, isolate selected, in the viewport controls. Again, the hotkey is just, I use this so much that Control 1 for the hotkey just makes life so much easier. So anyways, but yeah, so I'm going to go to face mode, and then I'm going to, again, I have my hotkey set up. I have Alt-X for X-ray. Let me show you really quick again where that is. Settings, preferences, hotkey editor. There's a whole new hotkey editor. It's this fancy new hotkey editor that they just created. But it's a little easier to set up the hotkey now than it used to be. Now you just go here to this search field, type in X-ray, and then there's this. You click on View X-ray, and then you just hit the hotkey that you want. Which again, I use Alt-X because I use that hotkey quite a bit. And then you click Save and Close, but I've already got mine set up, obviously. So anyways, X-ray mode just to be able to see the selections easier. But then I use the marquee select to go like this, and then I control marquee select. Again, you see the minus sign show up when you hold the control key, and I deselect, and it gives me that. So I just want this rear panel. In fact, let me isolate select again to turn that off just to double check. Yep, I have the rear panel selected. The rear panel is the only thing I want because I'm creating shells. I'm choosing a shell to then project a map towards that will then rip that shell out as its own piece. So anyways, I've selected that back panel, and now I shift right click, mapping, and then planar, let's see, Z, which is, you know, right at the bottom of my little recording window there, but hopefully you can see that. So shift right click, mapping, planar map Z, bam, that projects, and you see the projection manipulator faces the right way. And now I can just click and drag this manipulator off to the side here to get it out of the way. Again, we're just like, it's like we're doing a jigsaw puzzle. We just want to get all the pieces out of the way of each other so they're not overlapping, so that we can manipulate them before we put them back into the puzzle. So anyways, so there we go. And then of course, always you know when you project a map, you know, this is not done. This is not good, because you see those squares. Again, you turn on the checker pattern here. Again, this checker pattern button is new in Maya 2015, I think, actually. But anyways, it's new since I made my old video. So this is the new button. You don't need to go get my texture anymore. If you just click this button, it's just fine. It's not as good as my checker pattern texture, but it's faster and it gets the job done. So anyways, so check it out. These squares are not perfect squares like they're supposed to be. So we need to unfold that. That's the whole point of UV mapping, is to get rid of distortion. So, so we need to unfold this to get rid of that distortion. So what do? Right click. Again, always hold down the right click. Go to UV mode. Marquee select the entire shell. And with the shell selected in UV mode, you can do shift right click, unfold. Now again, pay attention, because this is different in my old video versus new video. This is a new thing. So unfold options. You got to go to the unfold options, because you have to do this. Wait, hold on. So okay, it killed my plugin. So let me, which is kind of funny, because it killed the plugin that's the problem anyways. But watch this: Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager, and let me find the stupid plugin to turn it on, just to tell you not to use it. So Unfold 3D. This is the plugin. This is the new Unfold. Let me turn it on just so you could see exactly what happens. And reset settings. I probably have to reopen that window. So there. Okay, this is what you will probably see when you first try to do an unfold with the options. This is what you will likely see when you try to open the options for unfolding. And so here's the thing: Unfold 3D. This is Maya's new unfold that sucks. It breaks. It screws things up. I'm just going to tell you right now, first thing you do when you try to unfold, go to the options and turn this off. Switch to legacy. So you go switch this from Unfold 3D to legacy. Now you've got something you can actually use. And for now, the default settings here are fine. You do want to check, though. There is a bug. I've seen a bug. Double check that this says 5,000. If this says 1, if it says maximum iterations 1, that's a bug. It's not supposed to say 1. Change this back to 5,000. I've seen it happen to me. I've seen it happen to students. And if this says 1 and you hit apply, nothing's going to happen. And you're going to be like, what the hell? I'm following directions. Why isn't it working? Just keep an eye on this value. Make sure it says 5,000. If it says 5,000, you're probably fine. So anyways, so go ahead and leave these all default for now. I'll show you how to play with these later. But you hit apply, bam. And now you notice it flipped upside down. First of all, though, check it out. The squares are nice and square. So the distortion's gone, which is great. If this is a perfectly flat plane, the selection we chose, again, that selection is the back panel. That's a perfectly flat plane. Maya better not screw that up. If Maya screws up a flat plane, you should just throw Maya in the trash and never use it again. Because Maya does struggle with UV mapping. Maya is not the best program for UV mapping. But you should be able to get certain things done pretty easily. So anyways, flat plane, yeah, Maya better not screw that up. So there we go. Now you notice it flipped it upside down. You see the letters are all upside down. That's not a big deal. Watch this. Ready? See these buttons right here? Click, 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 click. Bam. Now it's right side up. Not that it really matters. It doesn't really matter if it's upside down or not. I like to see it right side up just because it makes more sense to me when I look at it. I'm like, oh, okay, that's right side up. It doesn't really matter. And I can scale this down, scale it up. It doesn't really matter what I scale it as right now anyways, because I'm not done unfolding anyway. But I just want to get it kind of pushed out of the way and shrunk down so that I don't have to worry about overlapping it with other pieces on accident. Okay, but speaking of other pieces, let's finish this off. So the back panel is good to go. we can leave the back panel like it is and call it a day on that for now. Let me get this unfold options out of the way for now. But we need to make another selection. And when I make selections, just a little tip, when I make my selections, I like to turn off the checker pattern, because the checker pattern, when you go to face mode, when you mouse over the selections, it turns red, and that's kind of easy. But I have a face selected right there. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes when you have multiple faces selected. It's a little harder to see which faces are selected when the checker's turned on. But if you turn off the checkers, you're like, oh, I see now. So anyways, I turn off the checker while I'm making the selections, and then I turn it back on when I'm unfolding. Because the whole point of the checker is to see distortion. But you only really need to check that once you're done unfolding. So anyways. But now here's a couple things. Selection tricks. Now, again, selection tricks. I want to select the entire front panel, which I could just do like that. And then double check. I want the entire front panel. Well, and not just the front panel, though, in this case. I want the front panel and the side panels. And you'll see why in a minute. But I'm just saying, now, yeah, I could just turn the camera sideways and then marquee select right down the side like that. Yeah, that's pretty quick and easy. I just want to show you a little trick, though. I could have done this. I could have gone over here, face mode over here. This is the back panel, and that's the only thing I don't want, right? So I could just go into face mode and just marquee select, bam, right through the one-to-one space. Because the one-to-one space right now contains everything else besides this. So that's basically an easy way to invert my selection, is just grab them in the UV editor. So anyways, sometimes the UV editor is a great way to make selections, just so you know, which is a handy workflow tip. Anyways, but we got the selection we want now. So shift right click, mapping, and again, you know what? Let me just move this up higher. So I'll start it up here so you can see. Shift right click, mapping, planar, and again the Z. And why the Z? Because it's the largest surface area. So right here, you see my little widget. The Z is pointing this way. That's how I knew to project in this direction. Why? Because I am mapping these faces. In fact, look at the checker pattern. The faces in the front look somewhat okay. They still need to unfold, obviously, but look at the side panels. The side panels are streaked to infinity. Why? And if you look at the shell, Those side panels are right up here. They're literally infinitely small. So obviously the side panels are not, they're not going to project well from this angle, obviously, because you're projecting it towards this infinite, small thing. That's why those are so streaky. But the thing is, it doesn't really matter because we have to unfold anyways. The unfolding is what gets rid of that distortion. The only reason you have to project towards the largest surface area is basically just so you give Maya the best possible odds of not fucking it up. Fucking up the unfold. Because Maya, it's very possible, Maya is very capable of screwing up the most stupidest things. It should not screw up these things. It's just math. It should just work. But again, Maya has serious issues sometimes with unfolding even simple objects. Unless you know the tricks, which is what we'll show you today. But so anyways, the whole point of projecting is to basically create the shell. I just want that shell to have exactly the seams that I want. So I project to create the shell. And then I've got the shell here. Now I don't really need to move the shell anywhere because there's only two shells in this case. I really only want two shells in this case. Because again, the least amount of shells, the better. Less shells is better, and we'll talk about that again in a second. But okay, if this is the shell that I want, again in class, I always like to verbally quiz people to see if they're, they have critical thinking skills. So I'd say, okay, well, can you unfold it like this? Can you unfold it just like it is with, this shell and then this shell, and then those are the only seams there, right? The seam is right along the back there. Can you unfold it? Well, the answer is, well, kind of. Not well. And in fact, let's just do it. Here's the unfold again. I've left this window open, so I don't have to do the shift right click again. But anyways, I do have to go to UV mode though. Go to UV mode and select the shell. And then, now again, can I unfold it like this? Well, let's try it. So I'll just leave this all default and hit apply. But now here, look at this. It kind of looks like it worked, right? Let me turn off the checker pattern for a second. It kind of looks unfolded. You're like, wow, that looks kind of good, right? Yeah, but watch this. The whole point of the checker pattern is so you could look at it. Now look at it. See all that waviness, that distortion right there? That's squishy. That's gross. Right here especially. Here, just horrible distortion. That's just not good. That's not acceptable. So this, again, if I'm grading you, if I see a shell like this, I'll give you some points because I'll be like, okay, you're almost there. You've almost got it figured out. But it's still not good. It's still not acceptable because there's still a good amount of distortion there. You want to try to minimize that amount of distortion. Well, how do you do that? Well, if you see a bunch of distortion and you don't see an easy way to eliminate it, then the trick is you should attempt to cut some seams. Cutting seams is a good way to eliminate distortion, or at least minimize it. Now, the more seams you cut, the more likely the distortion will go away, but it also is inefficient. But we'll talk about that in a second. Now, I do want to point something out. I've been pointing this out in class lately, and I think it really kind of helps people understand this better. So check this out. Where is some horrible distortion? A lot of the distortion is coming up around here. And I'll just tell you right now a little visual cue. If you're doing this process, you're looking at a 3D model, and you're like, where should I put my shell? What shell choice should I make? Or where should I cut seams? If you're trying to decide where to put some seams, I'll tell you right now a little visual cue that will kind of tip you off that you might need a seam somewhere. It's this. If you see, and let me turn off the checker for a second so you can see something. If you see, okay, let's say that these two faces were the only faces that existed. This face doesn't exist. If it's only these two faces could unfold really easily on that edge, right? You just imagine that edge is like a hinge. Then these two faces here could unfold pretty easily. And then, okay, let's take it this way. These two faces, if this face didn't exist, these two faces could unfold on this edge pretty easily. So what I'm getting at is where it becomes tricky is when you have three different faces connected at an edge, like this edge in particular. This edge right here is trapping. It's trapping these three faces together. Like if you imagine a piece of tape on this edge, if you cut that tape, and so this edge is no longer connected, then these two faces can flip out like flaps. And let me show you a visual demonstration of this. So we need to cut some seams, and the most logical place that I can see is this edge right here to make the little flaps flip out. So, but we want to do that. Actually, it's any time you have those three, that scenario, right? So you've got kind of a whole bunch of faces right here connected. Here again, you've got multiple faces changing directions in different surface directions, right? So again, it's changing. It's like practically 90 degrees here. It's 90 degrees here. Plus, it's got an angle here. When it changes directions in multiple ways like that, that's when you should be suspicious that, okay, I'm probably going to need a seam. But those seams, that change in surface direction goes all the way around this border, right? So let's cut the seams all the way around. So let's go to edge mode. And now check this out. Here's a fun selection trick. Ready? I can click and then Control-Shift, double-click the next edge in line. See that? So I'll show you again with X-ray mode on. Click, Control-Shift, double-click. And what that does is it selects the edge ring. So this, if you double-click an edge, it gets the edge loop. So that's an edge loop. This is an edge ring. So the edge ring goes in the opposite direction of the edge loop. Anyway, so I just quickly selected the edge ring. Now, again, I could have just gone over here and marquee selected down. There's a lot of ways to do it. But knowing how to make a quick selection of edge rings is, again, another useful trick. The faster you get at making selections, the easier your life will become, just in Maya in general. Okay, so we got the edge ring selected. Again, and I just noticed that I don't think my texture borders are turned on. Oh, they are. Okay, cool. Okay, so now that I made that selection, I want to cut the UVs. I want to cut seams there. So again, in my previous video, it was the scissors, and I said, oh yeah, just click on the scissors. Well, they changed the scissors to a knife. So yeah, whatever. Okay, so, and they say new tool. It's not a new tool. It's not a new tool. They just changed the icon for it. So anyways, cut UVs. And again, I use marking menus, so shift right click, cut UVs. That's what I do. Cut UVs. Bam. Now I have seams. You see immediately they thicken They thicken because of, again, having the texture borders turned on. So now it's a visual representation of, oh, look, there's a seam there, which makes life easier. Because you're like, oh, look, there's my seams. Now I understand. But check it out. If you check out my checker pattern, nothing's changed. I cut the seams, but nothing has changed. Now, why is that? Well, because cutting the seam alone, just cutting the seam doesn't do anything until you actually do the unfold. Again, the unfold is what gets rid of the distortion. Cutting the seams just gives it a place to unfold more. So it's like cutting the tape on the box. If you cut the tape on the box just doesn't magically open by itself. You have to actually physically unfold it. It's okay. Anyways, so what do we got to do? Unfold constraints none. And I'm just going to go to UV mode, grab the shell, and hit apply. Actually, no, before I do that, you know what? Before I do that, I do want to show you this other way. Let me get this out of the way for a second. There's a different tool, and this is not a good tool. It doesn't really give you good results. But what it does is it shows you something very visual. In fact, let me turn this off for a second. Let me show you exactly what happens when things unfold. So I'm going to use this Smooth UV tool. Again, it's not as good. The results aren't as good. But it's a more visual method. So watch this. If I click and drag on this, see what happens as I click and drag on this, how it spreads apart. This is a good visual cue. If I cut a seam and then I do an unfold, if these edges spread apart, let me undo that and do it again just for fun. Ready? If I start to unfold this, if those seams, if those faces, those edges spread apart from each other, that's a good visual cue that, hey, looks like I made a good choice. Because the farther they spread apart, the more it's telling me that, oh, hey, Maya really wanted that seam there. Maya really needed a seam to allow these faces to spread out to get rid of distortion. So, anyways, and again, in some cases they don't spread out as much, but we'll talk about that in a minute. First of all, let me undo that, and let me do it the proper way with the unfold options window, and let's hit apply. And again, you see the same, very similar results. It's just that these results, I'm sure I've tested it a bunch of times. These results are better. It's a better algorithm. And you see, again, the real trick to deciding if it worked well or not is you go to the checker pattern. The checker pattern is your fail-safe kind of, hey, do I have nice clean squares? Are the squares good? That's how you know. Did the unfold do its job? If it didn't, maybe you need more seams, or maybe you need to play with some fancy settings in here. But that's that's a trick for a little bit later. Anyway, so yeah, nice clean squares. Those seams are clearly useful for eliminating distortion across this model. And again, here's why I made you, when you modeled this, this is why I made you cut this in half and instance it. Because this is instanced, check it out. Those UVs are getting unfolded across both models. Instances share the UVs. They share, technically they share the same shape node. So that's really hard to say fast. But anyways, so if you have an instance, even though it's mirrored, even though it's inverted, it's unwrapping it identically on both sides, which is awesome. Saves me a lot of hassle and time. It also shares the same UV space. So because this shares the same UV space, that means that this is going to take up way less room. This is, keep in mind, this is only half of the heart, right? If you had both halves of the heart, it's going to take up a whole lot more room on this panel, right? On this texture. Look here, this light gray area. That light gray area is your texture, right? You have to fit everything into this one-to-one space. This half of a heart takes up way less room. I mean, right now it's scaled up, but it's going to take up way less room if you only have half of a heart than if you have the entire thing. Which means if you have only half of it, that means it could scale up a bit and have more resolution. So the more efficient you are with your UV layouts, the more resolution you could put into them, so it looks prettier. Just saying. Okay, but we'll come back to that. So here we go. This is pretty good so far, but I do want to make a point that there's some cases here, certain edges, maybe you don't really need the seam. Like this spreads out pretty far. So that's clearly critical for it to be there. In fact, let me just rotate this for fun. So I'm going to rotate this. the E key, again, all those same tools work in both in all these viewports. So I'm going to switch to the E key to rotate it just for fun because I want this to be nice and straight up just because it makes me feel better. Does it really matter? No, but it makes me feel better to look at it straight up. Okay, so but again, back to this. These edges, this didn't spread out very far. When we cut this seam and we unfolded, didn't spread out very far. To me, that's an indicator that, maybe I don't really need that seam. Maybe that seam's not critical. And if we go here, turn on the checkers, if I do this, shift right click, move and sews it back together. And if I do it again, as soon as you do anything, move and sew, cut a seam, always unfold again. Now, here's the trick though. I'm gonna undo that. If I move and sew and do an unfold, double check the checkers again. Now, if I do that, if I sew it back together and do an unfold, if the checkers look okay, it's going to introduce a little bit of distortion. It has to because that's the whole point of, whether it's sewn or not sewn, But did it introduce enough distortion to be, unacceptable? In this case, probably not because again, that didn't spread out very far. Here, I already know that spreads out quite a bit. That if I sew that back together, it's going to introduce a bunch of distortion there. So I'm just going to leave that one as it is. And again, what's the whole point of trying to eliminate seams or trying to minimize the number of seams? Trying to eliminate the number of seams is because, what is this right here? This is a face. This is a face. If I paint right here, what happens if I paint right there? Nothing. Those are wasted pixels. So the whole point of trying to eliminate as many seams as you can is that these are wasted pixels. You can't really do anything with that. Those pixels just take up texture memory and start to choke your game engine eventually. It's just one of those things where it's a balancing act. You have to decide is if I sew this together, does it introduce so much distortion that it's unacceptable? Versus if I sew it together, at least there is sewing it together means it eliminates some wasted pixels. So that's the balancing act you have to worry about as a game artist. Wasted pixels versus getting rid of distortion. Okay, and again, going around, notice by the way that most of the really where those seams really spread apart, where's it happening in terms of the shape of this? In terms of the shape of this heart, the biggest gaps between the seams are where the angles are sharpest. Wherever the angles are sharpest, that's where you're going to get the most distortion and you're going to need the most seams. So this is a pretty sharp angle right here. And you see in the UV texture editor, you see that angle creates a pretty wide gap when you cut the seam. I just want to make that clear so that when you're doing this process, you start to instinctively look at shapes and go, yeah, that angle right there, I can already tell it's going to need some seams. You know what I'm saying? That is the trick to getting faster at this. You can just look at a shape and go like, you know what? I know exactly where I'm going to need some seams, so I'm just going to cut those seams right now. That saves you a little bit of trial and error. Because if you just do it with trial and error, you'll get there eventually. It'll just take you longer. As opposed to looking at this model and saying, yep, I'll probably need a seam there, probably need a seam there. These angles here, look at that. That's not a very acute angle, right? It's a very obtuse angle. It's a little bit, it's a pretty shallow angle. So you're like, oh, okay, well, look, what is that right here? That, really shallow angle there doesn't really give you much of a gap. There's not much of a seam there. Oh, okay, well, cool. I guess that means I could sew it together and probably not have a problem with distortion. Now, down here's a whole nother problem. Again, the whole point of, not the whole point, but one of the points of turning on the shaded UV display is it gives you a visual cue whenever things overlap. Now, again, overlapping UVs, it's not always bad. In this case, it's bad. Why is it bad? Because it's unintentional and there's just no possible way to make that a good overlap. That's not good. So we want to do something about this. In this case, probably the easiest solution is just go to edge mode, grab the edge, and move and sew. And now why did I feel okay doing that? Because this is not much of an overlap. It's basically same thing about these sewing these together. It's not changing. It's not really changing. It's not moving very much. It's not really spreading out very much. So it's enough that I'm like, yeah, sewing this together probably won't introduce a whole lot of distortion. So I'm probably fine just sewing it. But there's going to be another scenario later where you will see this. We have to do something else, which we'll get to that. But so this is probably good to go. I think this is probably a shell that's this is kind of like one of those. This is right on the edge of where I'm like, well, maybe I could sew that, but I'm not going to. I think it spreads out far enough. I'll leave it alone. But again, that's one of those judgment calls. You have to make a judgment call. Does it spread out far enough that I really feel like? Now you could test it if you want. You can go in there, turn on the checkers, unfold it, which I do need to do again still. I need to unfold this again. There we go. And if you unfold it, it'll just maximize the amount of distortion it gets rid of every time. So always unfold again every time. That's the most critical aspect of this whole process, is doing the unfold. So anyways, but now you could test this. You could try to sew it together, unfold it, and see if it, is it too much? But I'm not going to bother. I just want you to know that that's the trick. Test it with the checker pattern. Make sure the checker pattern looks good when you feel like you're probably done with this unfolding process. Okay, so that's this piece now, good to go. This shell. These two shells are probably fine. I could probably call it a day on this particular piece. But what do I do with it now? Well, the next step of the process, of course, is always to lay it out, right? To lay it out in the one-to-one space. However, I'm not going to do that yet. Why am I not going to do that yet? Because I have all these other pieces to do still. You got to unfold everything first, because this entire chair should fit in the one-to-one space. There's no point laying it out until you're done unfolding everything. So let's get to that. Okay, so this is good to go. I'll move on to the next heart shape. Again, kind of going in the same order as when I 3D modeled it, piece by piece. But so again, it's all the same steps. These steps are identical. I'm not doing anything new really. I mean, there's a couple new tricks to kind of making it work better, but it's the same steps. Project a map, cut a seam if you need it, unfold. Project a map, cut a seam if you need it, unfold. It's the same steps over and over and over. There's just little tricks to making sure it works properly sometimes. And again, part of that's just because Maya sucks at UVs. Other programs are much better at UV mapping. Or at least they're better because the algorithm's better, but they're also better because they just have tools that are just more intuitive and they make life easier. So look forward to that in the future of your schooling. I'm sure you'll get opportunities to use other programs, assuming that you continue with 3D modeling as your career path. Anyways, so I'm going to marquee select again, just very similar to what I did before. Hold the control key down to deselect the side panels there, and again, X-ray mode. I love that hotkey for X-ray mode because I use it all the time because it makes making selections so much easier. Okay, so I got the back panel just like before. It's the Z-axis I want to project on. So shift right click, and I'll do it up here again so you can see. Shift right click mapping, planar Z, bam. Now this actually gets this. If you check out the checker pattern, it actually gets us right in the ballpark. Those are pretty decent looking squares. But what are we going to do anyway? We're going to go to UV mode anyways, grab the shell, and again, hit apply. Bam. Uh-oh, turned it upside down. No big deal. Ready? Click, 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 click. Again, not that it matters. You could paint it upside down if you want. It's not that big of a deal. But anyways, I'm just saying. Okay, so again, I could do that same trick because before, if I want, I could just go to face mode, grab the whole thing, the entire one-to-one space, because that is everything else except that shell. And now I'm going to project again towards the Z, because again, the Z is still this direction, still facing the majority of the faces. Shift right click, mapping, planar Z. And that almost looks like, oh wow, it almost kind of looks right. But check it out. Look at so yeah, the front of it looks pretty decent. But look at the outer edge. The outer edge looks terrible, right? It's like, oh man. Well, clearly, obviously, we need to unfold this. Now, do we need seams here? I'm going to say, yeah, we probably do. And I'll show you why. Let me show you what happens if you don't cut seams. Now, again, some other program, just so you know, some other program might actually be able to unfold this nicely without seams. I'm going to tell you right now, Maya, here's what happens. Okay, let's do an unfold without seams. Ready? Apply. Look at that. Look at that. That's a mess. Look what happens over here. Ah, that's a mess. That's just not good. So, now, you know what? Just for fun, let me try a trick. Let me try a trick that I learned from this other video. I'll show you the link to this other guy's video. I have a link to it on my YouTube channel. I learned a lot from this other guy on YouTube, and so this helped me a lot. And this was, let me undo this first of all, because that's horrible. It's using these unfold constraints. And I'm not sure if this is going to work or not, to be honest with you, for this particular model. It's helped me with a lot of different shapes and models, but again, I'm not positive it's going to work on this one. So let's try it. So unfold constraints. Let's try horizontal first and see what happens. Okay, and now let's try vertical. That actually got me a pretty good result. It's like, it's pretty squishy on the edges though. So the edges are a little squishy. The front of it looks pretty good though. I'm way happier with this. So yeah, the edges look clearly like they need some seams, but the front of it looks great. Actually, I'm actually pretty happy with that. You know what? Let's maybe go with this for now, but then cut the extra seams we need where we need them, and maybe that way I won't have to cut as deeply into it. Okay, cool. So unfold constraints. We'll come back to this. I know because there's another thing later that's going to really screw up, and we definitely need these. So I'll come back to that in a minute. But for now, let me turn it back to none for a second, and let me do this. Let me cut the seams where I think we're going to need them, which is going to be, again, same kind of deal. I want to go and let me get this unfold out of the way. Okay, so again, I'm gonna turn on my texture borders. Oh, they're already on. Okay. So anyways, I'm gonna click on this, and then I'm gonna Control Shift double click that. Then I'm gonna. Do I need to go that deep? I don't know. Let's find out. Yeah, let's go one step deeper. I will kind of go. I'll go as deep as I think it should. I'll go here. So I'm gonna Control Shift click and then Control Shift double click. There we go. So now again, X-ray mode, just so you can see, I've got those edge rings going all the way around, because that's where I'm pretty sure I'm going to need seams all around there. Maybe not all the way around, but at least where the angles are very sharp, I'll probably need those. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut seams there. Shift right click, cut seams, and we'll do another unfold, and then we'll see if this gets us a better result around the edges, because again, the edges are starting to get squishy. So again, unfold, and now again this time I'm just going to do none this time and see what it does. And what I was really curious about was, if I did that, I was really curious to see if it would screw up the front of this, because I didn't pin those. I could pin those if I wanted to make sure Maya doesn't screw those up, but I didn't pin them. I was like, you know, let's just see what it does. Okay, so bam. Now again, here's what happens. It spreads out more in some places. Obviously, this is the sharpest angle. That's why it spreads out the most right there. But then in other places, yeah, some of those are kind of like iffy, where maybe I don't really need those, seams there. This in particular, for sure. But let's double check again for sure. Let's double check the checkers. The front of it looks pretty good, and then around the sides, yeah, definitely cleaned up a lot of that distortion around the sides. So some of those seams definitely came in handy for cleaning that up. Now, what do I do? Now, I can't leave it like this completely, because here's the most critical thing. And let me just jump right to this. Some of these I could sew up to minimize those seams there. This, I will for sure sew this up, because that's really not necessary. Here, again, it's kind of arguable, but I'll just leave it. Here, I'll sew that up. I think I'll leave these, and I'll leave the rest of these. But again, I do need to unfold again, because every time you start to do something like that, unfold again, just to minimize distortion. And that did kind of change a little bit in here now, but anyways, it feels pretty good still though. So, okay, but here's the real trick. Here's what we really want to strategically decide what to do here. This overlaps enough now, in this case. This is pretty bad. I need to do something about that. Now, if I sew that together, it overlaps enough that I'm pretty sure sewing that together is going to screw up my unfold, and it's going to introduce distortion. Potentially introduce distortion throughout the model, but it's definitely going to at least introduce some distortion right here. And of course, we want to avoid that. So what do I do? This is a puzzle. This is now even more like the metaphor of a jigsaw puzzle. So what do we do with that? Well, there's options, and let's discuss those options. So edge mode, first of all. Now edge mode, could I sew this? Yeah, but that doesn't really help me. But what if I cut here? See this edge here? If I cut that edge, shift right click, cut it, cut UVs. If I cut there, then I sew here. Watch this, move and sew, bam. Well, that's kind of cool. So what? In fact, let me cut this off first and just show you. By the way, when I cut this, this is now its own little floating piece. So basically, cutting off little pieces like this, sometimes cutting off these pieces makes it easier to kind of troubleshoot and say, okay, well, this piece is causing me problems. In fact, it's basically both of these pieces, really, that are causing me problems, right? So these two pieces were overlapping and causing problems. What do I do with them? So is there something I could do with them that'll make life easier for me? Yeah, okay, well, let's troubleshoot. Okay, edge mode. Well, I could sew them together here, maybe. That could maybe do something for me, but that doesn't really help. And in fact, it's probably not a good idea because the angles are probably going to introduce distortion even here. But what about this? Okay, now I could sew if I wanted to. I could sew that piece here. Then I could grab those edges. And again, mousing over an edge shows you where the other edge is, you know, the connecting edge, which is great for troubleshooting. But I could sew that one here. Now that's a little bit better. It's still got a little overlap though. So this is not an ideal solution. It's just one solution, right? And of course I haven't unfolded yet. So doing the unfold might get rid of that little bit of overlap. It's hard to say. So that's an option, but maybe not the best option. So what are our other options? Well, you know, you just start mousing over edges and say, well, could I sew it there? Could I sew it there? What is it better to sew it there? You know, what should I do? Here is another trick. Check this out. I'm checking all these edges and I'm like, well, I don't know. But what about this edge? Where is that edge? You know, where's the connecting edge? Obviously, there's got to be a connecting edge somewhere. Well, here's a really fun trick. In the UV editor, you know, you got the camera controls, right? Alt middle mouse, Alt right click. Well, how about the F key? Watch this. I have this edge selected. I hit the F key, bam. Oh shit, there it is. There's the other edge. So the F key will center the camera, the viewport camera, in between the two edges. You know, wherever this edge is versus that edge, the connecting edge. Hitting the F key, you go, oh look, it's way over there. Check this out. Shift right click, move and sew. Oh look, I can put it over there. Why not? You know, sure. Okay, so now again, this is not ideal having this kind of large gap here, but maybe there's some other model. Maybe there's another model like an M&M. Maybe there's an M&M model that I could like fit the UVs for that inside here. I don't know. I'm just saying this is the kind of jigsaw puzzle you need to kind of look at. Where can I put these pieces to maximize my texture space? Okay, but let me do the unfold. So I'm gonna grab this, unfold, options. Oh, it's already open, so don't need that. It's already open, so I'll just click apply. I'll go here, marquee, select the entire shell, hit apply, bam. And so this is now an acceptable solution with no overlaps. And again, always check the checkers. Close that to make it easier to see. Always double check. Is the distortion acceptable? Yeah, it looks pretty good. So yeah, I think that's an acceptable result. So again, this is what the process for chopping up a shell to get, you know, cutting the seams you need where you need them to minimize distortion. Yeah, again, these ones probably don't need to be there. So I'm gonna go ahead and sew those together. Oops, and I did close that this time, so let me apply that again. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's good to go. I'll take that as a finished piece. So we've got this whole chunk now all finished, and we just need to do this, and the good news is, again, because I told you to cut these into 4 quadrants, now we only have to unwrap one of these, and it'll finish all of them at once, which is awesome. So anyways, let's do that. Well, let's start with this piece because this piece is really easy. So let me just kill that again for a second, get it out of the way. This piece is really easy, which is awesome. But we're also going to do something fancy, and we're going to talk about something else. So first of all, let me hit Control-1 for a second. Take a look at this piece as it is. It's basically a cube, but it's just got a couple little edges to it so that it kind of has a little more shape to it. But more importantly, look at this, face mode. Let me grab this face. Let me grab this face. And watch this. Let me turn off my isolate select. Where are those faces? Those faces are buried inside other pieces of model, right? So those faces don't need to exist. And now they don't need to exist. And for one thing, deleting them will help the poly count, right? It's only 2 faces, so it's not helping the poly count a lot. But more importantly, this is something to be very conscious of. Deleting these faces frees up. Look at the texture sheet. Okay, if this is our texture sheet, look at how much room these take up on the texture sheet. Obviously we haven't arranged the texture sheet yet, but those are pretty large faces when you look at the scale of the entire model. So what do you do with that? Well, delete them. Obviously, watch. If I delete those, bam, that just freed up a bunch of extra room on my texture sheet. And again, those were taking up room on the texture sheet for no reason. You're never going to see those. I mean, you're probably not even going to bother to paint them. Like, why would you paint them? You're never going to see that particular face. So keep an eye on that. Always look for those interior faces, because those interior faces like that, they're going to screw up your whole process. It's going to make life sort of frustrating and miserable for you. Anyways, I'm just saying. Okay, so with those, and by the way, deleting those faces also makes the unwrapping process easier, because now, in reality, we actually don't even really have to do anything except for do an unfold. Technically, we would only really have to unfold this. But I do want to look where the seam is right now. The seam is on the bottom front bottom panel thing right there, right? That's not horrible. And technically, all I'd have to do is go to the unfold options and do an unfold, and this would be okay. But I don't want the seam there. Why don't I want the seam there? Well, because you want to hide the seams. Now, the seam there, having the seam there is better than having it here. It's better than having it there. That would be the worst possible place to put the seam. But the best possible place to put the seam is back here. Why? Because it's the most hidden. As a general rule of thumb, you really just want to hide your seams as much as possible. It's not as critical as it used to be back in the day, because some of the texturing tools are easier now, but it's still a good rule to try to hide your seams whenever you can. You know what? Yeah, let's just do this. Let's just do this the right way, or not necessarily the right way. There's a million ways, but let's do the whole process. Ready? So let's turn off X-ray mode for a second. Let me close this for a second. Shift right click. Yeah, actually I can do that. Shift right click, mapping, planar Y, and then bam, there we got that shell. I'm not going to even bother to move it off the 1-to-1 because it doesn't matter, because this is the only shell we have. It's the only shell we need. So projecting a shell, bam. Now we need the seam. So that got rid of projecting a shell across the entire model like that. Got rid of all the seams, with the exception, of course, of the border edges, because a border edge has to be a seam. But anyways, it got rid of all the seams. So now this is a solid piece going all the way around. Now I can choose to cut the seam wherever I want. And where am I going to do that? I'm going to do it right where I said a minute ago. I'm going to just get that edge right here, the edge loop right there. Shift right click, cut UVs. Bam, there's the seam. That is the best place for the seam, strategically speaking. And then I'm going to do the unfold. Now here's a funny story. Doing the unfold is probably going to, Maya's going to fuck this up. Which is funny because it shouldn't, because this is a really simple piece. It should not screw this up, but it's going to. And I can tell you that because it has every damn time I've unfolded this during my demos in class. So again, always switching to legacy, 5,000 iterations. In this case, watch what happens. If I leave this unfold constraint at none, look what happened. Do you see that? Let me undo that. Watch. Bam, it shrinks. Literally, it shrinks into nothing. It imploded into nothing. And this happens. I promise you it will happen to you at some point. You're going to do an unfold, and it shouldn't do that. It shouldn't do that. This is cut the way it should be. This looks like it should be, you cut the seam in the right place. It should not have a problem unfolding this. Especially not have a problem where it implodes into nothingness. That's ridiculous. So again, I'm going to undo that. That should not happen. That's retarded. So, but watch this. In fact, let's do it another wrong way. So again, this is very similar to the video that I learned from this other guy. Which again, there's a link to this guy's this guy's video in my YouTube channel to his YouTube channel. This video is called Using Maya's Unfold Feature So That It Actually Works by Josh Robinson. Watching that video definitely helped me understand this unfold constraint process a lot better. So check this out. If I do this unfold constraint horizontal, that's also horrible. Look at the UVs. That's horrible. That's just totally screwed up. Definitely a fail on Maya's part. So again, that's Maya's fault, not yours. But let me undo that. So again, unfold constraints none, it implodes into nothingness. Unfold constraints horizontal, it doesn't screw it up quite as bad, but it's still bad. Unfold constraints vertical, watch this. Bam. And then if you look at the shell, look, that's a pretty good shell. And it's almost there. Like the UVs, like the distortion looks pretty good. It's almost there. Now if I do unfold constraints vertical first and then do horizontal, hit apply, that is probably the best possible result that Maya is going to give me. That's a pretty good result. So, and I didn't even have to cut any seams or anything. Theoretically, I could cut some seams like right here and right here. That might make it like optimal, like the best possible results, especially like if I do it here and here as well. But I don't really need to. This is good enough, especially again for game engines. You want to be efficient. But again, I only got there. I only got that because I had to do this unfold constraints vertical and then horizontal, because the unfold constraints none totally screwed up. Now, just so you know, my general rule of thumb when I'm doing this this whole process, I'll usually give Maya a chance. I'll let Maya try to do the unfold constraints none, and if it gives me a good result, awesome. That saves me these extra steps. And I actually have had pretty good luck. The other guy, Josh, talks a lot of shit about unfold constraints none almost never works. I've had better luck than him, I guess. Maybe it's because it's newer versions of Maya. But anyways, I usually try none first. If it doesn't work, I undo. Then I try one of these. And then the other one. So just be ready to play with these. If Maya screws up completely, just try playing with these and seeing if you get better results that way. So that shell's good to go. I can move on to this one. And again, this one is the most complicated. And I'll tell you why. It's more complicated because it requires cutting into more shells. You're going to have to cut this into more pieces for it to work appropriately. And why? Because it's got some crazy twists and turns in it and some fancy complicated shapes. So this requires more shells. And that's, again, the whole point. Learning to unwrap complex objects. In many cases, a lot of it's just understanding where to cut the shells. Where do I put a seam? Which pieces do I rip off and create a shell out of? And again, I'm trying to walk you through this particular model. The real trick is, sure, you can follow my recipe and you could model this exactly how I modeled it, and you can unfold it exactly how I unfold it. The real trick is understanding why. Why am I cutting it where I'm cutting it? So I'm trying to kind of help you understand that verbally as I'm walking you through this. But that's why I would really recommend, sure, follow along, do this exactly to kind of get your wrap your head around it. But then take this knowledge and try to unwrap something else. Because that's the real trick, is understanding why I cut the shells where I cut them. So speaking of which, let's Control 1 to isolate selected on this, and let's rip this bad boy apart. What do we do? Okay, so face mode again. Always start with face mode. Pick some shells to rip off and create shells out of. And in this case, again, I'm just walking you through what I would do. Now, again, there's no real right answer. There's just sometimes better answers. Sometimes you find a better answer. Sometimes I've done the same thing a million times, but then like a month later, I'm redoing the same damn thing, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I'll bet you if I unfolded it this way, it'd probably give me even better results. So there's no real right answer, but there are wrong answers. The wrong answer, I'm gonna tell you right now, the wrong answer is horrible distortion. If you have horrible distortion, that's the wrong answer. So, or that's one way to get a wrong answer. Another wrong answer is automatic mapping, and it explodes into a million pieces, and I fail you. So don't use automatic mapping. Again, just a reminder, I will fail you. But anyways, back to what we should do is I'm going to go to face mode, marquee select right down the middle like this. I want this entire, like, basically what I want is like this. I want this panel. And if you look, here's what I saw. The reason I chose this panel to unfold on. I see this. I see this panel kind of flipping around and going down like this. If you imagine that, if these are all hinges, all these edges are hinges, imagine that just flipping out and kind of spreading out like a carpet. You know, you just kind of unfold it like a carpet, and then this is one long strip. And that makes it really easy to paint and makes it easy to unfold. That's what I saw. Because as soon as you introduce, if I started selecting any of these faces to go along with this shell, if I attached any of these faces with this shell, it's going to make the unfold process trickier. It's gonna introduce distortion. It's gonna be a pain, and it just doesn't make sense. This makes more sense. Okay, so again, what do we do? First thing, again, shift right click mapping. In this case, planar X, because planar X is this way, right? So planar X, and then scoot the shell off to the side. That gives me that shell, and again, Control 1. Because I have those faces selected, you can isolate selected on faces. That's why that went like that, but no big deal. Just so you know. Okay, so anyways, I've created that shell. Now, do I need a seam here? No, not really. Because why? Because this all unfolds in the same direction. It all unfolds basically along the x-axis. It all unfolds along the x-axis. There is no change in axes, the surface direction, right? These all, are going to unfold along the x. If I had included any of these, I would need to potentially put a seam somewhere, but I didn't. So now this is easy. I don't need a seam. I just grab the shell, and again, shift right click, unfold options, legacy 5000. And again, I'll go with none first, just in case. I can tell. This is one of the scenarios in which I would be suspicious. I would think that Maya might screw this up, and I would try to do unfold constraint vertical, but you don't really need to. I'll just do unfold constraints none, because in this case, I've done this a few times. This particular demo for my on-campus classes, and unfold constraint none gets me there. It's fine. Yeah, that's a great result. If you check the checkers again. Nice clean squares. That's a good result. I'll take it. I'm not worried. So unfold constraints none usually works for me until it doesn't. Then when it doesn't, don't panic. Just try one of these. Okay, so that shell's good to go. Again, I just like to scoot it off to the side to keep it out of my way. But what's next? I need to chop off some more pieces. So next piece I'm going to do, face mode, and I'm going to grab this, Control-Shift-Click, Control-Shift-Click. Just go right down the front of it like that. And again, I like X-ray mode, always double check your selection. Because if you forget to double check your selection and you accidentally clicked on one of these faces somehow, you're going to project a shell and it's going to get all weird and crazy, and it just gets funky. So just always double check your selections. That's one of the most common beginner mistake, is accidentally selecting things that you don't mean to select. Okay, anyway, so that's the shell I want, that whole front panel right down the front. And again, project a map. Let me hide that for a second. Shift right click. Oops, try to do it higher. Mapping, planar Z. In this case, the Z. Scoot it off to the side or up high, whatever. And then go up to UV mode. Grab the shell. Unfold options. And then, again, I'll leave it at none and just see what Maya does with it, and hit apply. And that looks pretty good. But again, check the checker pattern. Now, yeah, it's turned a little bit, but no big deal. I'll just hit the E key and just rotate it so it's a little bit more right side up. Again, not that you have to. Sometimes you do want to rotate things kind of funny if you're trying to fit them into one-to-one space, but that's a problem for later. For now, I just like to see everything right side up so that I can tell what everything is. But now, again, turn off those checkers so I can make selections. Hide that so I have more room on my screen. What's left? What's left is, if we look, actually, I'll turn the checkers on temporarily. What's left is just this, these panels here, this side panel here, and then this down here. We're almost there. We're almost done. So let's go into face mode. And again, I'll turn off the checker pattern temporarily, X-ray mode, and I'm just going to marquee select right down this little strip right here. And so now you can see, I'll just rotate around so you can see exactly what I got. I got that whole little strip. And again, why did I choose that strip like that? Well, because instinctively my brain says, well, at least that strip, yeah, it kind of twists a little bit, but at least that strip mostly will unfold in one direction only, which will make it a lot easier to unfold. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to unfold. I'm going to project a shell first. And in this case, I'm going to project shift right click, mapping. I'm going to do planar Y because that pretty much hits most of those. And then I'm going to scoot this off to the side. And again, do I need a seam? No, because I didn't choose any shells. I didn't choose a shell that has changes in surface direction in multiple directions. I chose that intentionally to make the unfold process easier. So there we go. Grab the shell, shift right click, unfold options, and hit apply. Bam. And that becomes a nice long, it's a pretty long strip. It's kind of scaled up pretty crazily. But that should, let me double check the checkers. In fact, scaling down the shell, scaling down the shell makes it easier to see the checkers, just so you know. Because if the checkers are too tiny, it's kind of hard to evaluate distortion that way. But yeah, that looks pretty acceptable. I'll take it. So what's next? Okay, again, I'm just walking you through my choices. Again, these aren't necessarily the right choices. They're just my choices. And again, the most critical aspect of this is that I'm getting rid of distortion, especially for beginners. That's my priority for you as a beginner. I'd rather see unwrapped shells that have the least amount of distortion. Efficiency is something that you could worry about a little bit later in your schooling. Anyways, but face mode, turn off the checkers temporarily, grab this. Now, this is the shell choice that I want next. And then here I'm going to go, again, the Z basically sort of faces most of them the most effectively. So mapping planar Z, scoot the shell off to the side, UV mode, grab the shell, apply, bam. And again, I'll flip it right side up just because it makes me happy. But that's it. And then the only thing left is this piece here. Although it's got some funkiness going on there. What is that? If you're curious, if you're like, what is that? Go into face mode and grab the face and hit the F key in this viewport. Do I have something? Do I have some geometry problems? Oh, good God. That would be terrible. Huh, interesting. Oh, did I grab something on accident? Let me see. Interesting. Well, seems okay. Let's try just moving on with the process and see what happens. Okay. So here we go. We've got I'm going to grab this last piece. It should be the last piece. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but that should be the last piece that we need to worry about. So let's go ahead and project a shell at it. Actually, we probably don't have to, but let's do it anyway. Shift right click. Oops, it's getting hidden there. Shift right click, mapping planar Y. That's got its own shell. Yeah, there's another face there somewhere. There's some faces. Weird. I'm not really sure what that is. Interesting. It looks like, oh, you know what? I wonder if it's got maybe my mapping. Huh, interesting. Okay. Well, let's not worry about that right now. Let's see if I can delete it. Huh. Okay. Well, that worked. So that whatever I deleted right there. Must have been some interesting geometry issues there. But if I was able to select it in face mode and then hit the delete key, and it didn't cause any problems. So it must have been an interior face or something, which is really weird because it's pretty rare that I have those problems these days. Okay, anyways, but we're back to good. So let's grab this, and then again, shift right click, mapping planar Y. There we go. So we're good on that. Now we just got to unfold it. But unfold options. Oops. Oh, see again, maximum iteration's 1. 5,000, enter, apply. Now here's the trick though. This is just a face chilling by itself. You don't want that. You want to avoid that at all costs. That is horribly inefficient. Don't just have a face chilling by itself. What are you going to do with that? Well, let's fix that. Let's do something with it. So where am I going to put it? Well, I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to grab this edge and move and sew it to this panel, this whole panel. Then it has just this little, extra little face attached to it. But here, watch this. Shift right click, move and sew. Look how it screws up the UVs. Check it out. Look what it did to my UVs. It totally screwed them up. Why did it do that? It did that because the scale was different between this shell and that shell. But here's the best part. It doesn't matter. Watch this. Go to UV mode, grab the entire shell with the new piece on it, unfold. See that? Nice and clean again. It fixed it for me. So just move and sew something. Just do the unfold again. Just do the unfold again and it should get you there. It should get you to where it's nice and clean and fixed. So anyways, that's it. Now all we got to do now is put it all in the one-to-one space and then export the UV map to Photoshop. And that's it. And you guys should know that by now. You should be familiar with that by now. So, but let's get it put into the one-to-one space. And then here's the thing. If you want to put the entire chair in the one-to-one space, just make sure you go into object mode, select all the objects. So object mode, select all the objects, then go to the polygons layout options menu. And again, prescale, set to world, and hit apply. Bam. And what it's awesome because that just gave me, let me turn the checkers on and off. So there you go. Check it out. All my squares are consistent size. So that means my texel space is good. And it's nicely unwrapped. And it's all fitting in the one-to-one space. Now, am I okay with this particular solution? It's not horrible, but I could probably find a slightly better way to do it. In fact, let's do that. In fact, you could do this, by the way, shell mode, and then click on a shell, and then just move it. That's a pretty handy trick. But if I do this, what if I put this over here? Maybe if I rotate it. In fact, let's do this. Let's get this shell up here somewhere. Rotate it a bit more. And let's put that over here. So here's where it becomes, again, like a jigsaw puzzle. And you're just now trying to say, okay, where could I put these pieces where they will fit most efficiently to maximize my use of texture space? In fact, let's even maybe do this. And then take this and put it here. So this is, again, it's a jigsaw puzzle. Where can you most effectively fit these pieces? Maybe this is best off over here. Now again, I'm turning it on its side. Is that bad? No, not really. Just it might make it a little more awkward to paint because maybe now I have to rotate my Photoshop canvas, paint it, then rotate it back, just to make life easier for me. But here we go. Now we're getting somewhere. This feels a lot better. This feels a lot more efficient in terms of layout, which means that now I could potentially, with this new layout, I could potentially either scale things up. I could scale things up and then reposition some things, or I have more room. Like I freed up a bunch of pixels now if I wanted to add more pieces. If I wanted to add, like maybe I model a couple more, those little squirrely things that go up right here. I could add like a throw pillow, but I could add more pieces and then fit them more effectively into this space efficiently. So I'm just saying this is it. And then now, again, just UV mode. Oh, and let me talk about exporting to Unity as well. Don't forget, when you export to Unity, you want to combine it. So combining it, it's going to get rid of your instances, right? You're going to lose your instances when you combine. But so let me talk about this. Do your layout, the UV layout we just did, polygons, layout, options. Do this layout before. Do the layout before you combine. Because watch, let me show you what happens. If I combine it right now, shift right click, combine. See how it changes colors? It's changing colors because it now has overlapping UVs. Those instances are no longer instances. They're all part of the same model now. And the UVs that you had done, those UVs from here, are now overlapping identically with these UVs. So it's going to be basically mirror imaged. but they're sharing UVs. They're sharing, which is fine. That's great. That's what you want. But what I'm getting at is, watch what happens if I do the layout now. Polygons, layout options. If I hit the layout now, watch what happens. Suddenly it's spreading out. All those shells, the whole point of doing the the instancing was that it was more efficient for my UV layout because it was sharing UV space. Now it's not. Now it's no longer sharing UV space, which means when it spread it all out, this is less efficient. And notice that those shells, a lot of those shells had to shrink. Like this shell, watch what happens. It shrank. It had to shrink in order to fit it. Same thing with like these things, like this shell. It's going to shrink them a little bit. And yeah, now you have the ability to paint separate textures, right? You could paint different textures for it. But the problem is, you could break up the symmetry if you want to now. But the problem is, yes, you can break up symmetry, but you're losing resolution. You're losing resolution when you do that. So this is better if you want higher resolution textures. Like, let's say you want to put, what if you wanted to put like fabric? If you want fabric on the back of the chair right there, you may not have enough resolution for the fabric to look like fabric. The threads might get pixelated and blurry. So I'm just saying, this is more efficient if you want higher resolution textures. If you don't care how, if you want to go with a lower resolution texture because you really want to put a bullet hole over here and you don't want it over here, yeah. So again, those are just the balancing acts you have to worry about as a game artist: efficiency versus symmetry and asymmetry. So anyways, but this is ready to go. This is a good enough layout. I could go into UV mode, grab the UVs. Polygons, and again, this is going to be hard to see unless I scoot this up. Polygons, UV snapshot, and then this is the same process that we did with the cube. So you just use, set these settings, pick a file to output to, hit OK. It's going to output your UVs. You bring those UVs into Photoshop as a layer, and you paint it. This is now a coloring book. Like I said, this is now like a coloring book. You just paint those UVs and then bring them back into Maya to test them. And then don't forget, also, again, output to Unity. You do need to do a web build every time. Always do a web build. So you guys are going to be pros at doing web builds. Every single week, this whole semester, that's awesome. Every single week, you're making a video game. You're making possibly the most boring video game in the world. Some of you tend to put more time into it than others. But you're making a video game every single week. And you're just learning how to make them prettier and prettier as we progress through the semester. But that's it. I'm not going to bother showing you the Unity stuff because it's all the same as the last CubeUV video I did. So you could just follow that process again if you forgot. But practice. Don't forget the midterm is next week. Make sure you practice. I would say do this. You should do this just for practice. But then you should also, I would say if you want to be really prepared for the midterm, I would say you should 3D model, unfold, and texture like 3 or 4 models. 3 or 4 decently complex models. If you do that between now and next week, you'll probably do just fine on the midterm. If you don't, if you just do this, you might be okay on the midterm. You might get through the midterm. If you don't even do this, if you don't do your homework, you're really going to struggle in the midterm. And don't forget, the midterm is the one thing that you can't redo. So I would definitely focus on being prepared for that. Okay, so anyway, good luck. I hope this helps. And you're welcome. And I will see you in class.